Okay, we are continuing Peidal Yudalef. We had Peidal Halach Yudalef was about a lady who, after she checked, there was found that she hadn't done a good job checking vegetables. And we spoke the last two times about how do you know when you can or cannot trust somebody. And we're now going to work with an assumption that the person who you're trusting is someone who's reliable, someone who you can trust, a man in the right situations, a lady and a child in the right situations. But part of the din, and part of an outlook just of thinking about trusting somebody is, how do you decide that somebody should not be trusted? Okay, that is to say, we have a person who, according to the official qualifications, they're trusted. Let's say, for example, in our case, the ladies check vegetables, and we decided, yes, the ladies trusted to check vegetables. And then we get a report that she's not doing a good job. Such as, for example, right in this din, we found a lady who, after she checked, she hadn't done a good job. You're not allowed to eat from her checking anymore. Under certain circumstances, you can't. So the question is, under what circumstances will you take that report and go with it and say, okay, now I will not trust this person anymore. Okay, and there's a lot to cover. Hopefully, we'll do the first half this time and the second half next time. Try to squeeze it all in. The common practices. What do? I want to know about a hechsher that I never heard of, a rabamash that I never heard of. I call up somebody else who knows this person. I say to him, Yanko, what do you know about this hechsher? And he says to me, oh, not reliable. What happened? I don't trust him. I won't trust the guy. Okay, so the question is whether that's right or wrong. That's the right attitude to take. And when someone tells you it's not a good hechsher, to therefore say, okay, not a good hechsher, we won't accept it. So I had a discussion many years ago with an Oven Gadol, whose name I'm not going to mention. I'm not going to mention just because we're going to be explaining how he's not mainstream thinking. Okay, so, and he said that practice of asking people, is it a good hechsher, and then taking their word on it is completely wrong. He said, every person who would know that a hashgachos is no good. Okay, we're trying to evaluate a hashgacha X. How would somebody know that? Well, another person who's involved in Kashrus would be that person would go there, would see what he does, and he'd report back to you that the person's not doing a good job. He said, well, that person is automatically a nogeah b'davar. That person is automatically has a nogeah because he also works in hashgacha. If I put him down, that is my hashgacha better. If I say his hashgacha is not so good, I looked over his hashgacha, he didn't do such a good job, well, that overall paints me in a good light, and maybe in a very particular situation. I go to a company and I say to them, no, that rabbi, no, you can't use them. What's the next thing they say is, okay, so could you give the hashgacha? We don't trust him, maybe we should let you do the thing also. So that person is automatically a nogeah b'davar. A nogeah b'davar is not allowed to say about somebody else.
That's if you would be willing to give hashgacha to that place.
Right, if you would be. So
if someone calls from out of town, restaurants, we have no shaykhs to that.
Okay, so I'm going to come to that in a second. But the person who's reporting it is potentially has a nogeah to it. He says, so in the case in our din, the halach over here, the lady was checking. You see the bugs out there afterwards. It's not a matter of nogeah over here. You saw the lady didn't do a good job, so you're not going to trust her anymore. But in commercial kashrus, so I said, wait a second. Well then, everybody who could possibly go to check up on this person is a nogeah. He said, right, the way commercial kashrus works, that only you have to be, involved in it very much to be able to understand it and be able to make a judgment, then you're automatically nogeah. He said, so it basically comes out that no person is ever nogeah, and no person is ever going to be trusted to say a hashgacha is no good. And therefore, any person who's a shemitah mitzvahs, a person who's a reputable person, he seems to be a person who does what he's supposed to do. If he says it's kosher, you should trust him. Now, before we go on, I just want to, just one caveat, that this whole discussion we're going to have about whether this is right or wrong is talking about when we want to know if the person, does he do a good job at his hashgacha, or does he not do a good job? That's what we're judging. If the person tells you that his standard is a different standard than yours, that's not a matter of someone told you he doesn't do a good job. The guy says, my meat is not glad, so then my food is not chol v'yisrael. It's not a matter of I don't trust him. I'm trusting him for as much as he does. He says to me, I only visit this company once a year, and in your mind it has to be visited 10 times a year. So it's not a matter of trusting other people. He's sort of told you up front that he doesn't have your standard. That's partial. So what we're talking about is, the person says to you, no, I'm doing a wonderful job, everything's great. And other people tell you he's not doing a good job. Should we treat them as a nogeah b'davar? Now, when I've talked to this brought this up to a number of different people, all of whom thought that it was ridiculous. They all didn't agree with it, although they had a hard time with this idea that saying that you shouldn't trust someone else about a hashgacha, that his report that another hashgacha is no good, because that person's always nogeah b'davar. Okay, but they weren't able to put into words exactly what's wrong with what the person's saying. Why isn't it true that everyone's nogeah b'davar? So in this week we're going to talk some of the parts of the question, and then in Mitzvah next time try and talk about some of the answers. Why it's right.
If I have my own private hashgacha, then I would nogeah b'davar because I would like the plan. But if I work for a corporation, CRC, my paycheck does not rely on what that fellow is going to be making.
Okay.
So I have no nogeah in that.
No, if you pay,
why am I nogeah b'davar?
you want your
Put nogeah b'davar.
Why? I don't.
you want your
Why am I nogeah b'davar?
What am I nogeah b'davar? You still care for the CRC to be successful.
Right.
Organization.
But I'm not personally gaining if I say you can eat at their restaurant.
You want the CRC.
If anything, I want it to be more kosher because it'll make my job easier that I can sell more products.
Okay.
That's not true.
Okay. So.
It's not true.
Say food service.
Food service. That's what I'm saying.
No.
Food
Food
service.
service is different.
Okay, hold a second. We're getting it. Baruch Hashem, you guys, right? That's right. What I'm talking to next. So the first question is: should we treat the person as being nogeah? Okay. So sometimes there's a mamash a direct financial gain from it.
Yes.
There are two hashgachos in town. If I say that he's not good, they're all going to come to me. This is a direct gain. You put money right into my pocket. Sometimes it's more indirect, which is to say, if the CRC does better, well then that'll trickle down to more money to me also. Okay? And sometimes that that'll have an effect. If the organization is that it trickles down, that maybe I'll get paid more also. Okay. But neither of those is so tremendously common. But there are other ones that are not as direct, or that are not as financial, and that are, let's say if I put down a smaller hashgacha, overall that will encourage companies to go to bigger hashgachas, the more reputable, the well-known ones, which overall is good for us. Okay? That's my job security is making sure that big hashgachas do well. If little guys come into business and they start giving hashgachas, overall that's not so good. That's not really financial, but it's just sort of like a general feeling. Or, very common, is that we have people with either, these are two things that are the same, either they have inflated egos or low self-esteem, usually same thing, and they like to put everybody down. It makes them feel good to just say, he's no good, and I don't like him, and like that. So,
every single day by them. So those are the Yantif mode.
Yantif mode?
Every Pesach. Well, Pesach was
Okay, fine. Okay, and last is, there are people who don't get along with each other. I don't like Beryl over there, so when you ask me, what do you think about Beryl's hashgacha, it's my way to get back at you by saying, nah, he doesn't know what he's doing. Okay, so, and it's easy, I just put him out of business. Okay, but just by saying, nah, but Beryl doesn't know what he's doing, I just put him out of business, that's my way of getting back at him. Okay, so, in fact, in Chosh Mishpat, in the siman about a nogeah b'davar is siman Lamed Chosh Mishpat, and there's a tremendous machlokes in siman Lamed. Okay, that siman there's a tremendous machlokes in Achronim what the din is. If you look at siman Lamed, turn all the pages there, just about every case you're going to see there is a case where the person who's considered nogeah is because he has a financial gain from the other person being wrong. When I say this about this person, I have something to gain money in my pocket because he loses out. And there's a big shaila in all the Achronim as to what the din is. What happens if it's not financial? What happens if I have a gain that's not a financial gain? It's more some other benefit that I have from the case. Okay, the Mechaber seems to say that no matter what the hana is,
materialistic,
no, just some other
feeling good about yourself.
Feel good, right? The Mechaber implies that it's even no matter what, any kind of hana makes you postulate this. The Ramah is mashma that it's only financial. The Ramah says it's only. There's a Ramah who says it's only if you hold Tavis Hana Mammon, whatever. It's mashma like that. The Shach and the Sma argue about it. The Ktseis brings a Maharit who brings a pile of rayas that it has to be financial. I mean a pile. He doesn't stop on and on with rayas that it has to be financial. And a lot of the Achronim, the Tumim and the Nesivis and Rick Vager, all want to answer, all want to explain. They say is that it could be for the person to say that himself. If I say something that has to do with me, any gain, even non-financial, is considered to make me a nogeah b'davar. But if I'm talking about my relative, then I'm only considered a nogeah. If I'm talking about my brother, I want to say Edith that helps my brother, that has to help him in a financial way. Okay, but according to what is coming out, I'm giving you the short version, but what's coming out is that there's good reason to think that a person who's nogeah just because it's good for me, even if I don't get any money in my pocket, Many Achronim hold that would be considered a nogeah b'davar, and others hold not. Okay, so it may be that the shaila, am I considered a nogeah b'davar or not nogeah b'davar, may be totally this. Most of the times, there's no direct financial gain. If the CRC does better, David Oppenheimer doesn't get more money. He gets an indirect benefits from it, maybe, or he doesn't like the person, this and that. But that's not liking in a second. But he gets more locked as his Hanukkah is too indirect. But again, that's a shaila whether that's considered a nogeah b'davar or it's not considered. Okay. Now, part of thinking about this, we have to just think. Things have, as over the years, things have changed. That now there are people who work for Hashgachos who have very fancy titles. Right? The titles are CEO. Okay, or there are people who work for Hashgachos but spend lots of time worrying about the budget. Okay, so you have to wonder if maybe those people, if it is considered a financial gain for them, even though the money's not in their pocket, but they seem to take it very personally, the way the business does. Even though they don't get the profits don't go into their pocket, but the profits have a lot. They're very involved in the finance. Right, so they're looking at it. They're very deep involved in the finances, different than Yankee Eisbach. You're not caring about the finances seriously. Overall, it's good for you, but you don't live in a budget that says, "Oh, I have to make sure we, make our payroll at the end of the month." Now, the last part of this is the thing is that soine, if you hate somebody, okay, and the word soine is a very strong word, but if you look in Shulchan Aruch, you don't have to be that much to be a soine. Okay, the thing is that a soine is kosher le'edus. A soine is allowed to say edus, but a soine is not kosher to be a dayan. Okay, now negate to this, which is hakan negate, is that if a soine is a dayan, b'diavad it's good. B'diavad, yes, b'diavad, a soine who's a dayan is his din that he made is good. B'diavad. But anyhow, so a soine is kosher le'edus. He's not kosher to be a dayan. What's the reason for that? What's the difference? So the Sma says, the difference is that when a person's saying edus, when I'm reporting a piece of information, so I'm just saying this is what happened. So the fact that I don't like you doesn't make any difference. I'm just reporting what happened. I saw you do the following thing. I saw you on Shabbos, the guy turned the light on. I'm just telling you what happened. It just turned on. If you did it or you didn't do it, we're not choshesh you're going to lie straight out.
And the guy is smart enough to know what to ask also.
Okay, he doesn't say it. But a dayan has to make a judgment call as to how serious something is, how to weigh it, lots of things that he has to judge. Since the dayan is making judgments, then the fact that he doesn't like the guy might cloud his judgment. He might think differently because he doesn't like the person. Zok Daki Tshuva. In Cain, the difference between a dayan and an aid is whether he has to make a judgment call or not. When someone's saying edus, which is not black and white, when someone's saying edus that involves itself a judgment call about somebody else, then that person is playing the role of a dayan, and then a certainly is not in one. And that's very much our case. When I walk into a hashgacha and I say they're not doing a good job. Sometimes I'm saying black and white. Okay, there were pigs running around the whole factory. The place is straight, nothing to talk about. Okay, sometimes it's black and white, but usually it's not. Usually it's a judgment. We'll talk about it in a second. Some cases, usually it's a judgment. The fact that he didn't notice the following thing, is that a significant thing or is it not significant? Does that show that he's callous, he doesn't know what he's doing? Or nothing, everybody makes mistakes. So there is a lot of judgment that goes into saying the person's not a good hashgacha. When we say he's not doing a good job, it's not a purely black and white question. It truly seems more, according to Dr. Tshuva, on the lines of a dayan than along the lines of an aid. I'm not just reporting information. I'm making a judgment on the person. You don't look happy. No. Okay, I'm making a judgment. In which case a soine is possible to do that. So forget about if he's possible because he's nogeah b'davar, because I have a benefit, which again it's a machlokes whether having a non-financial benefit makes you a nogeah b'davar, but I might be possible because I'm a soine, because I have to judge whether that person is a good hashgacha, and that judgment is along the Daki Tshuva is saying along the lines of a dayan. It's in Sivan Aleph, the Daki Tshuva, and saying person along when I'm judging in a dayan mode, a soine would not be kosher. Yeah, and as you know,
it's that kind of they become a son one day.
Yeah, that's why I said to be a soine, you don't have to be such a soine. You don't have to be to the extent of you didn't talk to him for 3 days. It's pretty easy. It's in Siman Lamed Gimel. Is
it common?
So we would think. Just what I'm coming to. You would think that everybody who works in Kashrus is completely l'shem shemayim, and they all love each other, and we're all trying to help each other. But Lamaisa, I'm not going to say the details of what it is, but the unfortunately there's enough bad blood between people and poor mitas between people who have shown very strong feelings that would border on what we'd call soine. Okay, who out to get people and etc. etc. We don't need to give all the gory details. And in this, I'm going to finish this part by telling you what the Mechaber says. When the Mechaber at the end of the Siman about yes, at the end of the Siman about nogeah b'davar, what's called Hanoah, this is what the Mechaber says. He says, Dvarim elu tluyim b'das hadayin v'oitzim binasai. These kind of judgments as whether someone is a nogeah, very much, the dayan has to really put a lot of thought into this. Sheyavin ikar hamishpatim. He has to think about what the judgment is going to mean. What is this din going to mean to the person? V'yeda davar hagorim l'davar acher. He has to think, what if I do this? What does that cause to something else? V'yamek lirois im yimtzel lazeh ha'ed sad hana be'edazu afilu b'derach rochadka v'nefla. He's got to put it in thought and say, is there any way that what he's saying could somehow, even in a far out way, benefit him? The dayan has to judge, if this person, I have to think about, what does it mean that he's saying that Chayanko broke the other guy's window? Does it have some long-term effect on him or some indirect benefit to him that gives, and if that's true, then he can't be kosher. So that's what heads to our next section, which is, so what I'm saying is that you can't just blindly say, well, if he said it, why should he be nogeah b'davar? We have to think about whether the person maybe is nogeah b'davar. Okay, so
how do you work with, if there's like a chain of command, like the mashgiach would go visit a plant and report to his superior, and that superior would make the decision. So who's the sonay? Let's say, so if mashgiach is a sonay, let's say he's not a sonay.
Who's the third party?
Dayan is the sonay. So like what? So then it wouldn't like. Say when you have multiple people giving that.
that's what we're heading to.
Mashiach goes to somebody else's.
And then he reports to
and after decide this guy's healthy.
Right, so that's exactly what we're heading to. Very good, though. So that's what we're heading to right now, which is, we have to think, in making these decisions, and this has to do with what Yanki said before, so you have to think is, what we don't care about, who's telling me the piece of information. When you call up the CRC, and David answers the phone and says, is this hashgacha with this funny symbol, is it good or not? His answering the question, we don't have to think is David Aronin, the person who's nogeah b'davar. That's not important. He's not the one who made the decision. We have to really think about the source of the information and say, does that person, a nogeah or a soine or somebody else who wouldn't be kosher to the edus? Okay? And I'm going to get... That's exactly right. Yes.
Right. So I'm just up to what you're saying. I'll be with Kabbalah or verbs and not this and that is. When I ask somebody a question, or when we tell somebody, maybe we're better off saying to a person, which I've said before, is, and since like, he's no good, we have no information.
Right, but the person who we're starting this discussion with said, if you say, I have no information about the person, okay, and that person is Shomer Shabbos, then the person should trust him. That's not what happens. Nowadays, if you say, I have no information, what people say is, oh, then I won't eat it. Or I'll go find someone who does have information. Right. But this person, his argument is, if the person is Shomer Shabbos, he keeps a kosher home, then why shouldn't we trust him? There's no reason not to trust him. You don't know about him. You have rumors of people
to trust him. I don't want it on my head.
So you're saying
I'm sure,
but what should the consumer do? Or what should you do if your restaurant wants to use one of these products? So why are you not taking it? He's saying this. Whoever will tell you he's no good, he's nogeah b'davar. Don't trust him.
Not enough information. I have too many things.
Wait, if the guy's Shomer Shabbos, why the information? Is he Shomer Shabbos? He keeps a kosher home? Does he keep a kosher home? He keeps a kosher home. So you can keep him. Well, so that's the argument.
People keep a kosher home and not out of home.
Thank you. Okay. Sit down. I'm going to give you a few examples. There's a certain hashgacha in the next section. We're not saying any names of hashgachos, okay? You could try to guess them who they are. Okay. These are all. I have personal vomit. Well, that's not okay. We have a hashgacha. We have a hashgacha. There's a hashgacha that very few people trust. Okay. The reason why most people don't trust that hashgacha, if you go down to the source, not why people talk about it, not that he told me. What's the source of it? The sources are from two plants that this hashgacha gives hashgacha to. Okay, and those two plants have a second hashgacha. Those two plants have another hashgacha, a very reputable hashgacha. Okay, the mashgichim in those plants both report that this other hashgacha is doing a poor job. Okay, the mashgichim for the reputable hashgacha report that this guy's doing a poor job. Okay? Those two guys who report that information, who are nice people, they get paid by the hour. If the other person would have less involvement in this company, they would have more money in their pocket. The company would potentially expand. Instead of giving them 2 hours a week, they'd have 4 hours a week. Instead of having 2 days a week, they'd have 4 days a week. So these people have a direct financial gain. The source of the information has a direct financial gain. If that hashgacha gets put down, we get more money in our pocket. We're directly it's in mamish, right money into their pocket, these people.
If they're not paid if they're paid by salary, it might be different.
Yes.
Anything that would say the other one's good.
They're paid by the hour. Okay. Another hashgacha. The hashgacha was the Rav Master of a hashgacha was quit. He was retiring. So the hashgacha, the board, decided, let's sell out to somebody else. So they went to another hashgacha and said, hi, we'd like to sell you our hashgacha. Okay. So the other hashgacha was thinking about buying this hashgacha, etc. Then the board changed their mind. They said, you know what, we'll find some guy who's local, and we'll assign him to be in charge of the hashgacha. Okay, the guy knew nothing. We'll assign him to be in charge of the hashgacha, and instead of selling it to you, we'll send one of our own guys. Okay. A year later, the potential buyers came by to review this hashgacha. They came by to do a review of that hashgacha, and they came back and saying that the guy who took over is not qualified. That's they said the guy's not qualified. So, and now whoever else asks information, they say no, it's not a good hashgacha. So, tell me, does the people who are trying to buy, are they not negated over? They wanted to buy the hashgacha. And it's not in the air. If these guys get put down enough, they'll sell out to them. That was the original deal. They were going to sell out to them. Now they put in somebody else. Are they not negated over to say that guy? It was a judgment. He's not qualified. Are they not negated? And now when somebody else asks them, again, the source is here.
Wouldn't something like that ruin their reputation as being reliable?
If what? If they say
if
something's no good,
if they're only saying that they're no good because they're no good because they want to buy it out, but that in turn, if people see that financial connection, it'll be.
So the question, but most people don't see that. The question, so maybe a little bit, but it depends how obvious it is. Okay, and that same hashgacha that I just told you that put this other guy down. They were trying to buy and they put someone down. They were working with the deal with somebody else. Okay, that other guy went to a plant. That other person went to a plant. And this hashgacha that's in between here, the one who was trying to buy the other guys out, went with this guy to another plant. And when they went to this other mashgiach to a plant, they walked in. For 6 months, the plant had been using a very kosher-scented ingredient, and he had no idea. The mashgiach who was there didn't even know they were using it. Forget whether it was kosher. He didn't even know they were using it. Okay, they'd been using it for at least 6 months. They didn't know he was using it. This hashgacha didn't automatically say this guy's worthless.
Which one?
The hashgacha that was going to buy the first one, now went to visit this other plant, didn't automatically passel that other mashgiach. Now, maybe that's reasonable. Maybe it's because that other mashgiach was trying to get, that other mashgiach had an in with the company and was trying to get them some business. Okay, so listen what's going on over here. When they dealt with one person they were trying to buy out, him they put down and they said, they put down and said, nah, he's no good, because they said could buy him out. The other guy who was doing things that were no good, the other guy was doing things that were potentially just as bad. To him, they said, he's a good mashgiach because he was helping them. Okay, so again, are we seeing that maybe some could be again these and
very complicated.
Okay.
How are we talking about here, Rabbi Cohen?
Okay.
You must read a lot of these.
Another hashgacha.
Horror books or something, you know?
No, these are all true stories. Every one of these are true stories. Yeah. In my other notes, you can see the names of the people.
Sounds like Dragnet.
Okay.
Dragnet.
Okay. A company wanted to sell an ingredient. A company wanted to sell an ingredient to a large reputable hashgacha. The reputable hashgacha said, we're not going to accept it unless we send our rabbi. And it had a little private hashgacha on it. They said, we're not going to take the product unless we send someone down to see it. They sent an RC down to see it. The RC went to look at it and said, the Rav Master is clueless. He doesn't know what he's doing. He can't figure what's going on in the plant. We shouldn't take the product. And this large hashgacha didn't take the product. Because of the RC's review, they did not take the product. Well, is it not reasonable that when the company was trying to sell this product, they're trying to sell, they have a customer who wants to buy from them. The rabbi comes in and says, we don't accept your hashgacha. Is that not a pretty logical next step for them to turn around and say, if our rabbi is not acceptable, you be the rabbi? Is that not they have a customer waiting. They have someone who wants to buy it. The rabbi who is giving hashgacha today they just announced he's no good. Okay, if you think he's no good, you give the hashgacha. Is that not a possible way to do that? Last is, one hashgacha, okay, I'm going to get to 3 hashgacha, a little complicated. One hashgacha calls another hashgacha and says, Should we take somebody else? Okay. Well, Hashgacha, in my case, we're up to H over here. Hashgacha H. The letters are going to confuse you. Hashgacha from one city calls Hashgacha in another city. Okay, and says to the Hashgacha in the second city. In your town, there's a third Hashgacha. Should we accept it? You guys got it so far? Okay. So the Hashgacha from who they call it says, you know what?
It goes and says with the Midwest conference and the little things.
So they said this, you should know the Lemeichash of that Hashgacha died. His son-in-law took over, and his son-in-law doesn't do a great job. So you shouldn't take it. So now the Hashgacha from the other city says, from now on we'll say, okay, we don't accept it, and they won't accept Hashgacha, and they tell other people. And consumers who call that Hashgacha will accept their word on it. They can't possibly see any gears. But think about it. How did they know that it wasn't a good Hashgacha? Because the person in the other city told them they're no good. What happened when the guy died? When the Lemeichash died, like in our first case, they wanted to buy him out. They wanted to take over that Hashgacha. So now their judgment as to the son-in-law doesn't do a good job, is that not potentially clouded by they wanted to buy him out? And people calling the people from the other city, when you call a Hashgachos from the other city, you would never dream of it in gears. You would take them, is it okay? They say, no, it's not good. They say, okay, it's no good. But so my point of these bunch of examples is, you really have to get to the source of the information, not just who's telling you the information. If I call up whoever, I call David Abraham, what do you know about this Hashgacha? He says, it's no good. So really the answer is it no good because you reviewed it? No, I not that, because I got told by Chaynankel, who told me by Beryl. Beryl's already reviewed it, so we have to judge if Beryl is nogeah, not if David Abraham is nogeah. He's so far removed, you don't see any possible nogeahs. But when the Mechaber says you have to look further into it, means is we have to, in this case, means you have to trace back to the source of the information to decide if it's nogeah. Okay, one last point. When I heard this originally from this other couple, I said to him, I said, there's a rule in Hilchos Lashon Hara that if someone tells me something about somebody else, I'm not allowed to believe Lashon Hara. If you tell me that this guy is a crook, I'm not allowed to believe you. I'm not allowed to believe a person that person's a crook. But the din is Lemeichash mebaii. I'm allowed to protect myself and not buy a used car from this guy when you just told me that he's a crook, because I'm not allowed to believe that he's a crook, but I'm allowed to protect myself and I'm allowed to protect myself and not have a financial deal with him because he might rip me off. I just heard that he might be a crook. So my question was, so why don't we say Lemeichash mebaii on these kind of Kashrus issues also? You're not allowed to believe the guy. You're not allowed to believe that he's a bad Hashgacha. But like Rabbi Eisenbach said before, he said, let's say I have no information on the person. In other words, I have reason to suspect there might be something wrong. That should be enough. So I won't believe you that he's not a good Hashgacha. But I believe you enough to the point that I just want to be careful. I'm careful. I wouldn't buy a used car from him. I should be careful not buy a corned beef sandwich from him. It should be the same thing. What?
So that's only for myself. Who says for Yenim I could do that?
What do you mean for Yenim?
I hear from somebody that... Right. I hear from Yenim that Yankel is no good. So I've got to be Abdel Kashdei for myself. So Yenim, I can tell all my restaurants, I can tell my care,
what's the difference? If I find out that this guy, if someone tells me he's a crook, should I not tell you that he's a crook?
No, that might be being most of Lashon Hara.
Okay, that's a good question. I don't know if I don't know.
No, can't be because I'm responsible for my kids. I don't know.
That's a fair question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that. But the question was, so why don't we say, if I heard it straight from the person, Lemeichash mebaii, I should be choshesh. I don't believe you that he's not a good Lemeichash, but I believe enough to the point that I won't go and eat that just because I want to be concerned that maybe it's true. To which he said, an amazing thing. He said, I'm not going to tell you who the person is. This person, obviously, this Adam Gadol, said, he's an Adam Gadol, he really is. He said, those rules of Lemeichash mebaii, all the cases are by cases for financial dealings, shidduchim, danger, health and safety, all things that are personal, things that you have a personal interest in. He says, it has not applied by Issa v'Heter. If Issa v'Heter, the way you decide if something is mutter or usher to eat is if the Torah tells you. The Torah says that if a person's nogeah b'davar, we don't trust him, or he's a Shomer Shabbos, you should trust him. We believe the guy that the food is kosher. If I believe that it's kosher, I'm doing what the Torah says. If it turns out that I made a mistake, and really the person is not doing a good job, that doesn't make a difference to me. I'm following the rules. The rules are, if the guy is a Shomer Shabbos, he told me the food is kosher, you believe him. So that's what I did. I did exactly what he told me. I did what the merchant wanted from me. So I have no reason not to do it. He went even further. He said, if you go ahead and trust certain Hashgachos and not other ones. You're deciding, I like him and I don't like him. If you make the judgment wrong, which could happen, if you judge wrong, then you're going to be responsible. Why do you eat trade food? Why do you trust this guy? Why do you not trust this guy? If you follow the rules, I trust everybody who's Shomer Shabbos, the Moshe has no kindness on you. You did what you're supposed to do. Whoever is a Shomer Shabbos, I trusted, and I ate all those people soon. If you're the one, you're making your own judgments, you're taking the law into your own hand. If you're wrong, your responsibility. His way, you're never wrong. No matter what you did, the Hashem said. Hashem said, eat food from that Eidach Lem Bisun. Fine, every Eidach Lem Bisun. I believe it fine. So,
Well, Eidach Lem Bisun has nothing to do with the gears, but over here we all know that it's always the gears involved.
that's what he's saying. Since that person's a nogeah b'davar, I don't trust the nogeah b'davar to say that it's no good. I rely on the standard assumption that if a person's Shomer Shabbos, that he's Eidach Lem Bisun, so I eat every Hashgachos.
Okay, do you have that choice over here?
What do you mean, do you have that choice? That's what he's saying. He's saying that's what you should do. You should, from almost any person who's a Shomer Shabbos, should eat Hashgacha. If someone tells you he's no good, that person is
we know that the Hashgachos is nogeah b'davar and Hashgachos.
No, not the Hashgacha nogeah. The one who told you he's no good is nogeah b'davar. The guy who said
the Hashgachos himself is nogeah b'davar.
Why is he nogeah b'davar?
Because he gets paid for it.
So you're arguing, you're saying is,
Every Hashgachos is nogeah b'davar.
Oh,
no matter how, no matter who, no matter
you're coming from a totally different angle. His argument here, no. His argument about nogeah b'davar is to say, when I say that you're Hashgacha, I'm nogeah b'davar. You're saying is, okay, that's a fair question. That's from out of left field. I have to think about that. That's from a different angle. You're saying, well, the nogeah b'davar versus nogeah b'davar, so it's like equal. Like they cancel each other out.
Eidach Lem Bisun, do you have a question for any Eidach Lem Bisun?
That what?
That person, not necessarily.
No, usually it's just reporting information. There's nothing.
I mean, a guy comes and I shafted this animal, is believed, right?
But what's in the game? Why is he Eidach? What's his nogeah over there?
In the case, he wants to sell you that.
If he's doing it himself, if he's the shaykhah.
He's a shaykhah, I shafted
Okay, so we're gonna maybe. I realize. We're gonna maybe talk about what you brought up next time. Now that I think about it, there's a part. I don't know if we're going to get to it, but maybe if we get to it next time, we'll talk about it. Okay, so we're almost at the end. When I mentioned this to Rabbi Sukkar, this idea that not saying Lemeichash like that, he said he didn't think it was right. He couldn't bring me a right that it wasn't right, but he said Pasha says that Lemeichash applies to Issa V'Heter just as much as to money things. He says think about it. Think about it. If you tell me that the guy might sell me, he's going to rip me off. I'm going to lose $2. I'm Lemeichash and I believe the person. I believe Lashon Hara. If you tell me that he might serve me treif, I don't believe him. He said, it just doesn't sound right. Something doesn't sound right about this. It's like I said, I care more about the money than I do about the Issa V'Heter. Something seems wrong about it. He couldn't bring me a right, but he didn't think it was right. So I talked about this to Rabbi Heber in Baltimore, who asked a person named, I don't know who the person is. His name is Rabbi Yochanan Stenkel. Okay? He's an authority on Hilchos Lashon Hara in Baltimore. He asked him what he thought about it. And he said, he's not an authority on Lashon Hara, on Hilchos Lashon Hara. And he said to him, he asked him what he thought. And he said back a very clear answer to the question. He said like this. He said, the rules of Lashon Hara, when we say we don't believe someone in Lashon Hara, means the person is saying something for which he has nemonis. If he were to come to aid him into Bezdin, they're believed on it. It's reputable. There's nothing wrong with what he's saying. But the Torah says, don't believe what the person said. The Torah is saying, even though he's telling the truth, you're not allowed to believe it. What the Torah says is, but you should believe it partially. Okay, he brought a right from a Chofetz Chaim. The Torah says, believe it partially. So don't believe it completely, you're not allowed to. Believe it partially to the extent that you don't let yourself get hurt by it. That's when the person is saying a regular piece of information for which he has nemonis. He says, in Issa V'Heter, the reason why someone wouldn't be believed is not because he doesn't have nemonis. It's not because you're not allowed to believe him, but because the person himself is lacking believability. There's something about him that makes us think he might be lying. He might not be telling the truth. Again, usually when he tells you the guy's a crook, he's telling the truth, but I'm not allowed to believe it. Over here, the question is, he might not be telling the truth. So in a case where let's say by a nogeah b'davar, by what's the example, chasher on a davar, where we think he might be lying, it makes no sense. Just like when the Torah says don't believe him, it doesn't make sense to say believe him a little bit. We think that he's a liar. If he's a liar, then I don't believe him at all. There's no reason to believe him. When the person is saying something that he has nemonis to say, just under the circumstances, I'm not allowed to believe him. The Torah says, don't believe him 95%, believe him 5%. But when a person is saying something like he's a choshen or he's a nogeah b'davar, the possibility here is that he's a complete liar. If he's lying about what he's saying, so then there's no sense to saying believe him a little bit, believe him to the extent of being choshen. So it comes out. So we're leaving off for today is we have this question. A person, there are situations we've talked about. There are situations when a person who's reporting that another hashgachos is no good is potentially a nogeah b'davar, he's potentially a soinei, one that might be possible to say edus. The person, if so, he has no nemanos to say that the other hashgachos is no good, and we should revert back to the old din. Excuse me, the person who's the Rav HaMachshir, the real Rav HaMachshir, is a person who puts on tefillin every morning and Shomer Shabbos, he eats kosher, I should believe him. So we're left at this point with a question. So Taka, why do we do what we do, which is to say, if you tell me that this hashgachos is no good, I'll take your word on it. If you're a nice person, or you're a reputable person, I'll take your word on it and not you from the hashgachos. The Lemeichash next time we'll try to see if we can get some answers.